Welcome back to another episode of The Art of the Outsmarting with the legendary Keith Mitnik. Thank you so much for doing this, Keith.
Right, I'm excited.
Yeah, I'm excited for this topic as well. Maybe you can give us a little bit of headway on what we're going to talk about.
Sure. We've been talking about damages in the last couple episodes and pain and how to talk to jurors, and we've now gone into the jury selection side of it. And there's a lot more to the jury selection. You got to first determine whether there's bias. You ask questions like you explain the difference between pain and suffering damages, human damages, and the economic damages. And you explain most people don't have a problem with the economic ones, but with the pain and suffering, some people call them non-economic damages or human damages, that some folks do have feelings against, some level of distrust. They think there's misuse. People exaggerate the overreach. They just have some feelings against it. How many of you have feelings against it? Then you determine, are those feelings against such that they may come into play? You got a bit of a bias that you can't just lay aside. It may impact you on top of, in addition to, evidence and the law, evidence plus reality. So we do those kind of things to find the bias people have it against. We explain to them respectfully how it works and why it matters and why the human damages are more susceptible, as we talked about last time, to bias. There are other layers to all this, and here's one that I find is worth talking about, where you will learn more, not just about bias against in establishing valid cause challenges where they belong, but you also kind of learn people's attitudes about it, which you want to know too. It's not all bias. Some of it's just, I want to know how you feel about it after we've talked a little bit about it. That's critical information to you when it comes time to exercising your peremptory challenges with whoever's left after cause challenges. Mm-hmm. I find these to be very informative questions. They also have the added benefit of their topics that I'll talk about in closing arguments, so we might as well find out how people feel about them in advance. Mm-hmm. One of them, and there are two main ones, one of them is, I like to ask people, the way these assessing damages are supposed to work is the focus is on not how much is the person going to get. It's on how much was taken. What is the fair value of what was lost in the way of health or enjoyment or quality of life? I'm going to say that again. The focus is on not how much is he going to get or she going to get. It's how much was taken. What's the fair value for what was lost in the way of health, enjoyment of life, quality of life.
That's a brilliant distinction.
And when you make that distinction, and you may explain a little, I may or may not. I mean, in other words, it's not like, wow, we're celebrating, you're getting all this money. There's a big hole dug is the idea, and there's a hole dug, and you're trying to, as best you can, fill it, recognizing you're never going to get their health back, but we're trying to balance it out. When I say that phrase, it's not about how much they're going to get, it's about how much was taken. What's the fair value for what was lost in the way of quality and enjoyment of life? Mm-hmm. How do you feel? What are your thoughts on that? You learn a lot. Now, often people just start talking, which is better. I try to stay out of suggesting potential answers. But occasionally people look at you like I don't get what you're after. Wow. And if they do, then I give them a couple examples. I say, well, some people may go, that makes perfect sense to me. I get the concept. And others go, rubs me the wrong way. Sounds like it's a fancy lawyer way to try to get more money. How do you feel when you're hearing that statement? And that may prime the pump if you need to get people talking. But at first, stay out of giving types of answers because you don't want to guide them towards answers. You'd rather hear what they got to say. But if you need to get them, talking, that'll help. And listen close to what they say. You're able
to create a dialogue with the jury?
Absolutely, and you should. A lot of it is you're establishing cause challenges were very targeted question and answer. Mm. But you also got to spend some time listening, and in order to listen, you have to give them something to talk about. And if I want them to talk, I want them to talk about something I care a lot about, how they feel about it.
Maybe
that's a good question. It gets them talking about something I care very much about.
Maybe you don't want to opine on this, but as a national trial attorney, you've been to almost probably every venue you could possibly try one of these cases. Do you see a difference in regions with people's biases that you have to overcome?
Yeah, but it's not state by state. It's locale by locale. There are no question places that are more anti-lawsuit, that have more negative feelings against lawsuits and money damages and pain and suffering. I don't know why that is.
How do you prepare in those tougher venues? How do you prepare yourself to succeed?
I get gird my loins and I get ready that we're going to have a lot of people who cause challenges, and hopefully we got plenty of jurors, because instead of needing 30 jurors to seat 6 or 12 or however many you're sitting in that venue, I may need 40 or 50 because maybe more people with bias. And there's certain places where you have much less of it and some more, and then other places kind of hit or miss, 50-50. You don't know what, just depends on a given day. But I hear people say, oh, that's not a good place to try a case. And I hear mediators and people say, oh, you can't, and defense lawyers, we're not paying you X amount. I mean, maybe your case is worth it, but not here.
Wow.
And my answer is, I think we can get a fair jury anywhere. So
Love that.
Let's do it. Because it's not about what they're used to. It's about who ends up on that jury. And if you know how to do jury selection correctly, and you do master the art of getting valid cause, I always say valid cause challenge. I'm not out getting cause challenge to show I can get them. Why would I want to get a cause challenge on someone who wasn't biased? I want them on the people that really shouldn't be deciding the case in all fairness. So my answer is I can level the playing field anywhere. So go on and have a false sense of security what's happened in the past. It wasn't me, or it wasn't someone that knows how to do cause challenges. And in the past, very few people did. When I was younger, I've already told the story, I didn't. But more and more people do know it now, which is a good thing, because at the end of the day, we all ought to want fair outcomes and fair jury trials.
For sure. Maybe you can, for the younger attorneys like myself, you can break down a little bit more procedurally cause challenges. Do you have a certain amount? Does it vary by venue, by judge? Like how does that?
Sure. You have, depending on the venue, peremptory challenges. I don't want to be too basic, but I will be. Peremptory challenges or a certain number you can use on anybody for any reason. You don't need to establish anything other than you can't use it for a wrong reason. You can't try to run people off because of their race or religion or things like that. But if you have a race neutral reason, you don't need to explain why. You just got a right to get rid of but strike them from the panel. Those are peremptories. Cause challenges are the challenges that the judge determines the person isn't, they have a bias, and as a matter of law, they shouldn't be on the jury. You're supposed to have jurors that can base their decisions solely on the evidence in the law, not the evidence law plus a bias coming into play. In order to establish cause challenges, you have to, and there's law in every venue that says this is a cause challenge, this isn't, and then there's always tons of gray. And you got to learn how to educate the jurors so they don't think they're somehow weak-minded or unfair to acknowledge what needs to be acknowledged there in order to establish the record for the judge to grant a cause challenges. But once you do establish that, you have unlimited cause challenges. It's not like, well, you can get 5 people that are not going to be fair. After that, you got to put up with unfair people. We're built on a system that everything is supposed to be a fair trial. They're not all fair trials, but it's supposed to be. That's the ideal. So you have unlimited cause challenges.
You've given some really juicy stories, like you alluded to just a moment ago from prior episodes of the series, but maybe you can give a couple more stories of times that you've had to tussle to get the best jury selection.
Yeah, I'll tell you, here's a quick story that I walked into a venue in a very rural area, not in Florida, in the South. Didn't even have security scanners or even a deputy at the front door. You just walked in and out of the courthouse.
Wow.
It's in the middle of nowhere.
Wow.
Beautiful little town, by the way. Courthouse sat up on a hill. It was this huge courtroom. And it was a med mal case. So there's med mal's heavy bias cases. Judge brought in 100 jurors.
Why are med mal cases more heavy bias? Just to
They're heavy bias because a lot of people feel they can't get a good doctor because of all these lawsuits, frivolous lawsuits. Every time something doesn't go right, you want to blame a doctor. And doctors can't always cure you. And so people are happy suing doctors, and it's because of all these lawsuits, running up insurance premiums, why I can't get a good doctor for my family. And so there's heavy bias in those cases. People, and you know why? It's different. There's a car crash. And someone says, nah, I'm not crazy about all these lawsuits, but it's not personal. When it comes to med mal, people that have the bias often feel it's personal. These lawsuits are affecting me. My insurance rate's up because of you. So it's a strong, scary bias. So anyhow, we walk into this place, and just as a little aside, they have all these beautiful oak trees all around it. And I walk out at the end of the day after a long jury selection. I say long, just the opposite, after a long, stressful day, but a short jury selection. I go, what is that music? Elvis is playing. They got speakers in the trees.
oh wow, that's groovy.
Playing Elvis music coming out, which I like Elvis, but I wasn't expecting to hear it out in the middle of nowhere in this courthouse. But anyhow, I walk into this cavernous courtroom, and I'm ready to roll up my sleeves and do jury selection with 100 people. And they got paddles. They all got paddles. Judge says we're using paddles, not names. And I've got in jury selection, the bias topics I have to cover are much more in a med mal case than in a car crash case. So I got, like 8 or 10 big bias questions to cover with 100 people. And I stand up to go do my jury selection, and I've learned their local law, and I'm all ready to go. And as I get up, the judge says, okay, Mr. Mitnik, I understand you're going to be conducting the voir dire for the plaintiffs. I said, yes, sir. He goes, all right, you got 20 minutes. And I chuckled, and I said, yes, sir, yes. No, I'm not. You got 20 minutes. And I looked over at the lawyer that brought me in. I'm like, when were you going to tell me this? I didn't look at him mean, but I'm thinking I'm going to wring your neck. I needed to know. So I've got between here and the podium to figure out how in the hell am I going to do this in 20 minutes. I was figuring it's going to be 3, 4, maybe 5 hours with that many people. So you got to adjust. So I got up and I said, all right, folks, you can probably tell by the look on my face when the judge said 20 minutes, I didn't realize I had 20 minutes. I said, but he's the boss. We're going to be done in 20 minutes. I said, I got a bunch of questions I wanted to ask you about. And I was going to do it by topic because they're all important. We just don't have time. I said, I want to explain to you why I'm asking what I'm asking real quick. And then I'm going to list some topics. But let me first explain. And I told my story. I think I used mustard-based barbecue sauce versus tomato-based barbecue, red versus yellow barbecue sauce. It was barbecue country. And
to address your biases.
The best biases. So I explained. I said, everybody understand what I'm getting at? Doesn't make you an unfair person. No, it's an honor system. Yes. So now I got everybody's prepped. And I normally took longer. I got it done in about 60 damn seconds. I was done with that. And I said, all right, I'm going to list for you. Please do not raise your paddle. I want you to think. Is my answer to that question, yes, I have a bias against it, like your bias, explain my bias against the red barbecue sauce. Yeah, I got a bias against it, and I cannot assure the court that I can lay it aside. And if so, in your mind go, when we get to the right point, I need to raise my paddle. But I'm going to list about 6 subjects, and if on any one of them you would have raised your paddle if we'd done them separately, just keep it in your mind. At the end, I'm going to ask you how many of you would raise your paddle, any one of them. And then we'll all raise them at once. Is everybody with me? Yep. And I said, okay. How many of you have feelings in general against malpractice case? You think there are too many of them. They're making it, you can't get a good doctor, your friend. And a couple paddles. So hold your paddles. Hold on. We're going to get them all at the end. Oh, yeah, okay. I said, all right, next one. How many of you think if the fancy experts are going to come in here and testify whether the doctor did right or didn't do right, won't be agreeing? How many of you say that, listen, if the fancy experts can't agree, I'm not going to be able to find against them. I need them all to agree he did wrong or I can't find against them. You understand my question? Keep in mind, how many of you say, honestly, on that one, I got a bias, I need that, or I'm not going to be able to find for you. You've already lost because I'm telling you they won't be agreeing. Okay. And I went now, boom, 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 all these hot questions. I said, all right, y'all got them in your mind. And if you got 3 or 4, you only need to raise it once. If you only got 1, it's still paddle up. How many of you need to raise your paddle by telling the judge I can't assure the court that I can base my decision solely on the evidence? It's going to be the evidence plus that bias coming into play in all honesty in this honor system. Like 80 paddles went up. I said, okay, as I call your number out, you can put your paddle down. Wrote them all down. And I said, now did everybody understand by raising your paddle you were telling the judge so-and-so? Was there any confusion? No. I know it's been quick, but anybody in this short period want to change your answer? Nope. You standing by your answer? Yep. And if I hush up now and sit down, can I rest assured that was your final answer? Yes, sir. Anybody not? Raise your paddle. I see no paddles. And I said, all right, Your Honor, I'm done. He goes, Mr. Mitnik, you got 5 more minutes. I said, I don't think I need them. I sat down. They got up and did some, you can all be fair stuff, and we go back in chambers. And the judge says, all right, Mr. Mitnik, you got your cause challenge? I said, yes, I do. I said, I got 79 or 80, whatever it was. He goes, defense says, Your Honor, he didn't ask a single question of those people. We never heard him say a word. How can that, we don't know there's confusion. He goes, when was he supposed to do that in 20 minutes? Mr. Mitnik, give me your list. He granted every damn one of them.
Wow.
So you got to adapt to the circumstances.
That's an incredible story. Good for you.
Yep.
Does that help you shorten your game in general, or?
Yes. Here's a lesson out of that. It's not all war stories. Let's convert that into something useful to others. I go to venues where I know I'm not getting along. I'm not surprised. I was kind of pat myself on the back, proud of myself to think of it quick. But in advance, I know it's short. I call it bundling. Bundle them. Instead of asking all the questions separately, lump them. Instead of doing, I normally would do bias questions on, let's start with feelings against personal injury lawsuits. Now let's talk about feelings against pain and suffering. Now let's talk about feelings against large verdicts, millions of dollars. And I go through all, and I can say, you know what, I don't need to, I'd rather do them separate, but I don't have to. Feelings against lawsuits in general, feelings against pain and suffering, I can put those 2 together. Well, now I just saved some time, 2 in 1. So there's total bundling like I did there, and there's partial bundling. Or you're just very selective. You go, all right, I got 6, 7 things I want to ask about. I ain't going to have time. Let's pick the top 3. So the answer is, when I hear you only got 30 minutes, I'm like, all right. But I'm not like, all right, well, why bother? I'm like, okay, I can do a lot in leveling the playing field in 30 minutes. Just tell me in advance so I can plan accordingly. So there are ways to do it quicker. And the one thing that gets sacrificed, though, with the quicker you go is the less time you got to hear them talk and get the sense of the people, which is a terrible loss because you want to hear them. Mm-hmm. But if you give me, let me disclaimer, there are lawyers who disagree with me who are extraordinary lawyers. I don't have all the answers. I just have my way. If I have to pick and choose between finding out bias and establishing it, or finding out more about the jurors individually, I'll sacrifice the finding out more about the jurors because I'd rather be in the dark about you but know I've gotten rid of the bias than to know a bunch about with you and find out, no, I'm not going to win with you and I can't do anything about it. So that's my choice. But the lesson is you don't need 2, 3, 4 hours to pick a jury. I prefer it, but I do it in car crash, I'm typically done an hour and a half with no restraints.
That's fantastic. What are, in closing this episode, what are some other thoughts that you want to impart on this subject to people?
Just the importance of, the essential importance of jury selection isn't just a time to get up and yuck it up and make them like you. You do want them to like you. You want to be, you make them like them. You don't waste the time, and you talk straight to them. And they go, you know what, this guy's calling it like he sees it. He's direct. He tells us why he's doing what he's doing, and he doesn't waste a lot of time. So that you do. But all this other stuff of trying to be overly cutesy, and look, I hope when I give my analogies and things, they find them to be entertaining and they laugh at it and stuff. But, we're not, you want them to like you. Don't get me wrong. You just need to prioritize it. I see so many defense lawyers. It's all just about yucking it up and being their friend and talking it up and then trying to undo your cause challenges. Your job up there is to get a fair jury. Mm-hmm. And a lot of lawyers want to sell their case in jury selection. If I have an opportunity to score a point here and there, am I going to just ignore it? Of course not. But jury selection isn't designed to start selling your case. It's about trying to get a fair jury. I'm going to get to sell my case. It's called opening statement. I don't need two of them. But you know what I won't be able to do in an opening statement? Eliminate bias and find out some stuff about the jurors. So keep in mind, jury selection is about getting a fair jury and making wise decisions with your peremptory challenges. Hopefully you gathered some information and got some feelings from their answers. That's what it's about. When you finish that, sit down.
This might require a bit of a yoga stretch, but final question is, if at all, do these lessons play out of the courtroom for you, like your regular life?
Absolutely. Because I realize in life, bias, it doesn't pop up in courtrooms. Bias is in life. They happen to follow people into courtrooms. So when I'm talking to somebody and I want to convince them of something, I'm going to be mindful they got their own biases. And if I'm having a conversation with someone, I'll give an example. I try to stay out of, I'm going to be very neutral. I stay out of politics. I have my beliefs and they're strong beliefs, but I understand others have different beliefs and I respect their beliefs. And I try not to, when I'm talking to people like this, I try to show enough respect not to get into that. But I've been in settings where people have no idea what my politics are. And they start spouting stuff off to me like, of course, I agree with them. And I'm not only disagree, I passionately disagree. I rarely bait into it. I'll just nod, because I don't, want to have a fight with my Uber driver. But I'm always shocked. Why would you just assume it? And it's people being oblivious to other people's biases. And so I try to respect that. I realize everybody doesn't see life the way I do, and I don't try not to force my views on them. That's just being a good human being to me. And if I find out they're aligned with me, now we can talk all day. But if I need to convince them of something, got nothing to do with the lawsuit, just out on the street. I'm talking to some salesperson, I want to convince them of something. Be mindful. The most effective way you're ever going to convince somebody of your point of view is to try to figure out their point of view. If you just blindly work in your own head, they're liable to wall off. Same way it works in a courtroom. So if you can ask a little bit, I'm not going to question them like a jury selection, but a few little questions. How do you feel about it? What do you think about it? You learn a lot. And then you can go, okay, or just common sense. This guy wants to sell it to me. He's going to say what I want to hear. But I need to get beyond that. I want to get some real answers. How can I get past the bias he wants to sell to me? I don't mind he wants to sell it to me, but I'd like to get some real answers. And I say, look, I'm more likely to buy this if I feel like you're just kind of telling it to me like it is. And I'm not going to run away if you tell me something that's not great, because there's a lot about it I already like. But I've heard this. What's the truth about that? And you can see them going, I'm supposed to gloss over it. And maybe they do. They don't have good sense. If they got good sense, they're going to say, there's some truth, but let me tell you why we worked around that. And I go, I appreciate it. I want it. I'll take it.
Incredible.
So, yeah, it works in life. And you know what it all works back to? I've said it a bunch of times that I believe in it. Respect people in a courtroom. Respect people in life. And if they aren't respecting you, I'm combative. I want to get in a fight. No, the wiser and older I get, the more I say it ain't worth it. Life's short. They got their views. move on.
It's bloody brilliant, as per usual. Thank you.